On this episode of Still Loading, we are zany to the max. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of the Still Loading podcast. I am your host, Josh Koval, and today on the show, it is a first-time guest, and it is a little bit different from some of the other guests I've had on. Gabe Swarr is on the podcast today, and he is an animation producer and cartoonist. Gabe, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for agreeing to come onto the podcast.
Of course. I listened to a couple episodes. I'm a big fan. This is a good show.
Thank you. Thank you. Seriously. So the way this all kind of came about for the listeners is a couple months ago. Actually, this is going to be coming out in April. So in case you have anything to promote around April, there you go.
Okay.
But a couple months ago, back in November of 2020, I had an interview with Mike Micah, who is a game designer, a game developer, and he had retweeted one of your tweets about a game that you had made, and it's a game called Life in the Analog Age, which was based off of your web series, your web comic of the same name. And I played through it, and I legitimately really liked it. It was this really fun, atmospheric puzzle game. I actually was whistling the theme song before you got onto the Zoom call here.
Oh, thanks.
It's good, man. I legitimately really enjoyed it. But we'll get into that before I heap praise on it.
Okay.
But so he tweeted about it, and I'm like, all right, I'll check this out. And I played through it, and I really liked it. So I responded to him, and he said, you should have Gabe on. I'm like, so I said, why not? And so I kind of scoured the internet to try to find an email to reach out to you on, found it on I think it was your Life in the Analog Age website, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
So I found it through there, and that's how this came to be. So a reason I wanted to have you on, and the reason it comes back to gaming as well, is that besides the fact that you're an animator and an animation producer and a cartoonist, you are also a retro gaming enthusiast. So my first question is, how did you first get into video games, and what are some of your favorite video games / consoles?
Well, I think the very first game I ever saw in my life was I think it was that, like, we had a thing called Pen Supreme. I don't know if you had those. You grew up in Pennsylvania, the same as me.
Yeah.
And there were these stores, Pen Supreme, and they had a Pitfall game, like an arcade game there. And I was like, what is going on? Like, I just couldn't even, my brain couldn't figure it out. It was weird because it was like a cartoon, but then you could control it. It was like just the weirdest thing, And it was, go ahead.
No, I was sorry. I'm just losing my shit because that was literally the first thought I had the first time I saw a video game too. I was at a friend's house playing Super Mario Bros. And I'm like, this is a cartoon I can control? Holy crap, this is a game changer. Sorry, go on. No one else has said that before.
And then ever since then, I was fascinated by it, but we had, I grew up in Pennsylvania, and we didn't have a lot of money or anything. So I think for some reason, we got a used VIC-20. That was the first computer that we had in the house. And I was really little. I was maybe 5 or something. And my parents said that we just wanted to get it so you could play games, but it was really hard to get it working, And then, then right after that, I got an NES for Christmas, and it was just a huge step up,
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
Where I grew up, there was literally nothing to do. There's farmland all around, and
I feel you on that.
And there was nothing to do. You get on a bike, and I'd have to ride like at least 20 minutes to get to my friend's house, and just to hang out, and so that's my brother. I got I got this Nintendo with Super Mario Brothers and Legend of Zelda. That was the two games that we had. Exactly. And my brother and I just obsessed over them, and that's all we did. My little brother, we just played all the time. I mean, I even did a report in school about how much I loved the NES and how much I played it. And then ever since then, man, I would get games for Christmas, and it was It's kind of hard to understand now, but back then you would get a game and it was expensive, and
Yeah.
that was all you could get. Is like, all, I only had 5 6 games or whatever, and that was all you could play, and you played them until you got good at them, and then you could finish them or get Nintendo Power and figure out how to get through them, or figure out a
Yep.
cheat,
Yep.
or that's the only way you could play, because it was. And the other thing that was cool about it too was like the social aspect, because I would go to school and be like, hey man, oh my gosh, how do you get past this part in Castlevania 2? Like, I don't understand. What do I do with whatever it is, the red crystal or whatever? And I was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you get to and I was like, how could you ever figure that out? Like, that was the only way you could talk. I mean, when you could like talk to other people and figure out like how to
Hmm.
get through stuff, or borrow games was another thing. Like, you go and you borrow a game, and I remember I lent out Legend of Zelda for, I think it was like some really bad game, like Bart versus Space Mutants
Oh,
or
oh,
something,
you
and
poor soul.
like my friend didn't want to give it back, so my mom had to like intervene and like actually like call the mom and like get my game back and everything. So
Of course, because he realized what you had versus what he had, and
exactly.
oh my goodness. So I'm actually going to take a page out of my buddy Cade's book. My buddy Cade is the host of the Gaming Memories podcast. So let's just talk about some of your NES memories. And what are some of your memories surrounding other memories? You just listed one there, or a few there, but what are some of the other memories that you had surrounding the NES and growing up with it?
um
Some of your favorite games too. We can even use that as a jumping
yeah, I
off point.
mean, yeah, my all-time favorite games have to be like any platformer game. Like, that's my all-time favorite genre across the board,
Hmm.
and the NES is like the best place to go for that too, which, because that was the genre. And I think one of my earliest gaming memories, well, one of my favorite is, I had a friend, his name was Dean, and he came over, and we stayed up all night long and played Super Mario Brothers 2. And I don't remember if we finished it, but we must have gotten like super, super far in it, like without warping or anything, just like
Yeah,
playing
yeah.
straight through. Because I think it was like right around when it came out, and we didn't know how, the warps or anything like that. So that was a great memory. And I remember like, I love Bionic Commando. It's one of my favorite games ever, and it's a platformer game where you can't jump. Like, I think
You
that's
have to
what makes it.
swing. You have
Yeah,
to
you have to
you have
like
to use the
actually.
claw swing thing or whatever.
Yeah, and it's kind of weird because it's kind of like it's almost like a puzzle game. Like, you're trying to figure out how to like get up to there, and you have to get good at using the bionic arm. And I remember like the first time I played that, I was like, man, this is like a it's that's when I first noticed like game design or something. You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
there's something different about this, and I don't know what it is, but it's just such a cool idea, and it's cool to swing around on this stuff. And I can't like I think my brother and his friend were bigger fans of that game before me, because okay, so what happened was, like, I had an NES and I was really bad at sharing, and and eventually my parents bought my brother an NES just so
Okay.
we could like have our own games and play. He could play in his room and I could play in my room.
Yeah, yeah.
And sometimes we'd get together and play, and other times like, but he had his games and I had my games, and like he would have his games, and that was like one of the games that he found, and I was like jealous because I was like, man, that game's so cool. Like, it's such a cool game. And yeah, and another one of my favorite memories is Super Mario Brothers 3. Like, I was in
Hmm.
seventh or eighth grade, I think, when that came out, and I went over to my friend's house, and I didn't have the game, but my friend just got it, and I had the Nintendo Power that had like the guide in it,
Okay,
and
okay.
and that was like the fun part of that game was like I would sit there with a guide and he'd be playing, and I'd like help him get through. Oh, if you go up here, there's a secret up here, or and like that was like a fun like interactive way of hanging out and playing a game. It was like that weekend was Super Mario Brothers 3, and I think it was WWF Friday, whatever the Friday Night Lights was, or whatever it was, Friday Night
Like, were
Rumble
you
or whatever. It was the
watching
one
it
that
or
was
were
on. Yeah, it was
you're
like that. Like, I went over to his house to sleep over, and it was like WWF Friday night, and then Super Mario Brothers 3 the
oh
whole
my
rest of the
god, that
weekend.
sounds like the greatest week like
And then
sleepover
I
ever.
think Road Mad Max. Yeah, that's right. We watched Mad Max 2 at this, like,
Okay.
that weekend too. So it was like the coolest weekend of like the coolest stuff. And we would skateboard too. Like we were skating all over the place too. So.
Man, you had like the quintessential 80s night right there, but obviously as a well, you grew up in it, so it makes sense. That's awesome though. I had similar experiences, but it like I said, I'm a little bit younger than you, so my basis for all that was N64. That was my first console. I'm old enough that Super Nintendo probably should have been my first console, but I didn't get it till I was a little bit older. But my friend and I, we would have sleepovers, and we would usually either rent a game from Blockbuster, or we would get pizza and pretzels, and we would play not GoldenEye, but The World Was Not Enough, a different James Bond game, and we would play that on multiplayer all night long. And that was like our go-to, and of course soda. But now we realize high fructose corn syrup can give you every kind of disease known to man. So it's kind of a bummer. But no, that's awesome though. That's so. What other game? Any other games on the NES that you have like fond memories of?
I Mega Man 3 was like one of the first, probably the first Mega Man game I beat.
That soundtrack too, man.
Oh my gosh, it's so good. It's
So
so
good.
good. And I would just draw Rush all the time too. Like I love drawing Rush and Mega Man. Um,
Well, actually, before you go on, this is a good time to bring up this is kind of like a tangent side question, but it's related to this gaming stuff right here. So we kind of buried the lead at the beginning here. The thing that you're currently working on as an animator, as an animation producer specifically, is the Animaniacs reboot,
yep.
which still blows my mind. And we're going to talk about that later on, but just so people can kind of get an idea of like what you do in the industry right now. So my question relating back to your NES memories and animation, kind of combining these two together, would there be any NES, it doesn't have to be NES, but any video game property that you would want to do a cartoon of now? Is there anything that like a doesn't even have to be Mario or Mega Man. It could be a Bionic Commando cartoon, like what would be a cartoon you would want to try to create?
I always wanted to do Wario. Like I think it'd be awesome to do freaking
I could see that.
hilarious, short, funny Wario cartoons. And because he's just like a liar and a cheat, and he's just like
Yeah.
such a jerk,
Wah.
and he's so much fun. Like I love characters like that, and it'd be great to do a show based on more. I just off the top of my head, that would be the best.
I
And
would love to see that. I'm amazed that Nintendo didn't do that in the 90s. Like his character type is the perfect character type for cartoon characters in the 90s. He's like right up there with that gross humor of like Ren and Stimpy and Rocco's Modern Life and stuff like that. Like his sense of humor would be perfect for that.
Exactly. Yeah, I know that Nintendo's very shy. Like they got kind of
Yeah.
burned in the '90s, and they're very apprehensive and very protective of their properties. And like that's why because you have that Super Mario Brothers movie to thank for that. And I think they are now. I know they are. Not that much insider information, but like they are moving more into being an entertainment uh, company. So you're going to see a lot more like TVs and shows based on their properties.
Well, they're making that the Mario movie from Illumination is doing the Mario 3D animated movie, right?
Yep,
I mean that's
exactly.
been announced, and also, I mean, apparently it got canned, but they were going to do a show with Netflix for Legend of Zelda and Star Fox, and then but that got canned because someone slipped and announced it before it was supposed to, and then we don't have it, either of them.
I have a feeling those are still in the works, though. I mean, they're kind of like big deals, and they got to find the right people,
Hmm.
and with Nintendo, it really is trust. So I think it's a very long. They play the long game, and we're gonna have to wait. We're gonna have to wait till they find someone they like to do these kinds of things, and it'll be cool, when they finally do it. Because as long as Miyamoto's like involved, I think Miyamoto always wanted to make cartoons, and I think now if he actually now that he has a chance to do it, I think he's gonna. I think that's why the company's been moving in that direction because I have a
And
feeling that's just the type of person he is.
well, that makes sense too, because even the original hit that I mean, he created, Donkey Kong, was supposed to be a Popeye game. So,
Exactly.
I mean, based off that classic cartoon, which that was a cartoon strip before that, before it became animated, right? Or am I wrong?
Yep. Yeah, it was a comic strip.
It was a comic strip. I thought so.
Yeah, in the
Probably
late. 20s, early 30s, I
Yeah.
think, is when it
There's
premiered.
so many. I always find it strange when you look back on the NES and just the 80s and 90s in general, with how much of a resurgence there was of old comic strip characters from almost like 60, 70 years prior. And now they're getting cartoons and video games like Felix the Cat.
Yep.
Uh, you also have Little Nemo and the Dream Master for the NES, and that was that comic strip from like forever ago. I just find that so the NES was just such a weird era where they just like, let's just get every known license and try to find a way to cram it into a game, even if it's
Yeah.
not meant for kids, like RoboCop.
Yeah, I mean, they were just like I mean, you could tell they wanted to make a ton of games, and what would make a good game, and what would sell, and you know, yeah, RoboCop's a good example. It's like that whole movie and everything. It was like that's not a kids movie,
No, it's
and
not.
but they had a cartoon, they had toys, they had video games. You know, it was like it's weird. You know, it's like Dune too. Like when Dune came out, they wanted it to be like Star Wars, and it was like, no, it's not exactly Star Wars.
I mean, that's what I feel like almost every sci-fi thing has been chasing ever since. You know, I mean, even look at the Star Trek reboots, the not Michael Bay, sorry, J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies. They're a lot more Star Wars esque than they are
Exactly.
Star Trek. And I'm not even saying that as a Star Wars. I like Star Wars. I'm just like, I'm not even saying that as a Star Trek fan. Like always, Star Trek, the most I watched it was when I was a kid, and all of the important stuff of that show went right over my head because that's a lot more nuanced than anyone gives it credit for.
Yeah,
Well, Star
yeah,
Trek fans give it credit for, but obviously the casual viewer like myself does not give it credit.
yeah. It's like very. It's yeah. I like that about Star Trek. I kind of wish that the J J Abrams stuff was more like that anyway. You know, like it's I don't know. They think their way out of problems, basically.
It was
You
a lot
know.
more social commentary from what I understand too. It was especially it was what was the first interracial kiss on television, that show.
Yep. Yep.
But anyway, so back to NES.
Yeah.
So did you from there? Did you move on to Super Nintendo or what? Because you said you got the NES when you were in like sixth or seventh or eighth grade, somewhere around there, like middle to junior high. So did you continue playing games after that? Because generally around that time, when kids got into high school, is when they were like, "Well, I don't want to play games anymore because it's not quote unquote cool." So were you one of those kids and got back into it later, or did you stick
I
with it the whole way through?
I played games until the 16-bit, like right. Um, I had my NES, and then the Super Nintendo was coming out. They didn't know when it was going to come out, like maybe a year or something. And I was reading all those EGMs and everything, and I was like, man, like this Genesis is like so cool. Like, what I want to do is upgrade the 16-bit system, and I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
go Genesis. I'd like, it's kind of like uh, a kind of way of growing up or feeling cooler or something, So
And definitely Sega's marketing worked on you because they advertised it as like the older, more adult system. So it
yeah,
definitely worked.
I think it might have been like I don't know if it was right around that time because like it was before Sonic came out. Like Sonic was coming out like I don't know that summer or something,
Mm.
and I bought the Genesis and I was like and I got a game that was kind of like F Zero, which was Burning Force, and I kind of got a game that was like R Type, which was Arrow Flash, and then ordered Sonic and then when I got like I sold my NES to get the Genesis,
Mm.
and so I was playing Genesis, and then Sonic came out, and I was like, man, this system's awesome. Like it sounds great. It's like super fast and everything. And my brother really liked it, and then my brother got the Super Nintendo, and I was like, oh man, Super Mario World is so good.
Oh
It's
my
so
god.
good. And then Super Mario Kart, and around that time too, I was like, I got to stop playing games so much just because I want to concentrate on my career. Like I want to concentrate on like drawing and so around that time like I worked I started working when I was like 12 and I saved all my money and borrowed money from my grandma to get an Amiga computer
Okay.
and what I did is like my parents got like me a lot of those like animation books. So what I would do is just go through and I would draw on the Amiga because Amiga was really good at like actually animating at 24 frames a second.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it was like powerful enough to do it. And I had a little Wacom tablet. It wasn't even a Wacom tablet. It was like had a cord on the
Hmm.
pen and everything. And what I did is I sat down all the time and just animated just my own stuff, my own ideas, or went through the books and learned bouncing ball and all that stuff. I did all that stuff while I was in high school before I even went to school to learn animation. And also like I was obsessed with like Looney Tunes and Tex Avery and Tom and Jerry, and I got Chuck Jones's book and read it cover to cover, and I was like, man, this is like there's so much history here. And then I got the Tex Avery book, I read that, and then the Joe Barbera book came out, and I was like, man, this era of cartoons, this like 40s, you know, yeah, basically all the 40s, early 50s cartoons were like my all-time favorite. Like they're always on TV, and they're
Hmm.
always like every Saturday morning they just had the same chunk of Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck and Porky Pig and Yosemite Sam, like all those characters. They would just play them over and over again, and I got to know the directors. I got books about like when they came out, and I would tape them off TV and then make notes of like who the director was, and
Hmm.
like and I studied them. Like I actually like went through and like studied them, and that's when around that time when I realized like you could actually like make cartoons. You know, like I could have a career making cartoons. You know, so that's what I did. Is like I really studied all that stuff, became really serious, and I would play like the occasional Amiga game, but it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
always just like whatever came with the magazine. There was always like discs that came with the magazine. And I think the only game I even played was like Cannon Fodder, which was an awesome game. But like that was like basically the only game I played on it because I wanted to. I was consciously trying to like learn animation and stay away from games so I could concentrate on my career. You know.
That's the always the catch 22 for gamers. I know a lot of, I went to school for game design, and I remember one of the early things my teacher said is like, at some point you have to stop playing games so you can make them. I still remember one kid was like, "Oh, I need at least 60 hours of JRPGs a week to function." He said that out loud in the class, and I'm like, 60 hours. I'm like, bitch, that's a full-time job. Like, how do you live? How do you have a job outside of that? How do you find time to do anything?
Yeah, JRPGs too. Like I
I
played
know,
like
right?
Dragon Warrior when on NES, and I can honestly say I hated that game. I hated it. I hated it so much, and I hated it so much that I was like, I don't know if I ever want to play an RPG again. Like I love Zelda because it's like you're dungeon crawling and it's all action, but
Hmm.
like Dragon Warrior is just menus and grinding and like I was like, all
Yeah.
I want to do is go over there. Oh, guess what? I can't go over there because I'm not powerful enough. I got to stay over here and build up all this the number. Like I don't care. Like I don't care enough about this to
Just
put in
let
all
me
this
go
time.
there.
Yeah, like let me jump on the person's head to get rid of them. Like that's like that instantaneous like
I can
Mario
see.
versus Dragon
Yeah.
Warrior. It's like it's very obvious in that like I like the twitchy arcadey like
You like platformers, like you
instantaneous.
said before. That's
Exactly.
your
Yeah.
genre of choice.
Yep.
I can understand that. I started out as a kind of, I kind of more of like an everything kind of gamer. I love JRPGs because I played a bunch of them when I was younger, like Final Fantasy 7 and 8 and 9 and 6. I didn't play 6 till years later. Um, but then outside of that, I don't really play them all that much. I'm kind of like you, where I'm more of a platformer guy, but I actually started with 3D platformers. And it's funny because my buddy Justin, who I started the podcast with years ago, he's a 2D platformer guy like you are. Like he loves Mega Man, he loves Mario, he's good at them. It takes me so long to get anywhere in a Mega Man game, and he just blows through it. Even if it's one he's never played before, he'll just blow through it. Versus for me with 3D platformers, I blow through those, and he's having a hard time gauging the distance and whatnot because it's that depth that the Z axis just throws everything out of whack.
Yep. Yep.
Um, but in any case, so that's funny though. So did you ever end up enjoying RPGs later on, or was it something that you just never got into?
I figured that I I don't have I mean time management is like something that everyone always struggles with, and I came to the conclusion a while ago there's these games that take a really long time to play and beat and to get through, and they're RPGs. And if I want, I could play a platformer, and I could play 3 or 4 platformers and finish them in the same amount of time that I can get through one like JRPG.
Yeah.
So I'd rather play the 3 or 4 platformers. And at this point too in gaming, like there are a billion games to play, and everyone has a crazy backlog, and it's like maybe maybe I would sit and watch someone play, but I don't for fun while I'm doodling or something. But I don't know if I'd want to go through a game like that. Like I
And
really don't, you know?
especially now, I mean, I can only imagine how busy you are as an animator and as at working in animation. Like, I just feel like it's probably a lot more time intensive than
Yeah.
most other jobs. So, like getting into a 60, even if it's not an RPG, like, what is it? I just played through, I grinded through two games before my daughter was born, and I played Ghost of Tsushima, and that game was one of the best games I've ever played in my life, but it was like a 60-hour game. Like I grinded out 60 hours in like a week and a half because I'm like, I need to do it before she gets here. And I got through it, but it's like I can only imagine like
Well, Breath of the Wild, I played for like months and months and months because I just didn't have time to like put 100 hours in or whatever it
yeah.
was. You know, like if you look at my Smash Brothers, like whenever that game came out, I've been playing it since, and I finally hit like so many 100 hours. You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
and it's just because I'm hitting like these little sessions. You know, I don't have like extended periods of time to play. You know,
If I may make a suggestion, have you ever heard of a game called Halloween Forever?
is that the one where you're like a pumpkin guy running
Yes.
around? Is it
Yes.
cool?
Yes, the reason I even bring it up is because literally last night I interviewed the developer for it. The episode that he that this is going
Oh,
to really
cool.
put a place of our recording. Is going to really put a date on it. But the episode I recorded with him is coming out tomorrow as like a bonus. But I got a shout out to Chuhai Labs. They sent me a review code for it, and I played through it, and I loved it. It kind of reminds me of like Ghosts and Goblins, but fair, and it has some Mega Man elements to it because you actually there's some shooter elements.
Oh,
um
cool.
it's it's worth your while. It's a lot of fun. It's a shorter game. Like you can beat it in a sitting.
Oh,
um
great.
but like it's still difficult and challenging, so like you'll die a couple times and have to work your way through it, but there's a good replayability factor because there's a lot of different characters you can get and they have different attributes, so that way it kind of re-incentivize it incentivizes you to go back through, see if you can find these new characters and then try replaying the game with them and see how
Oh,
they
that's
do it.
cool.
I really legitimately enjoyed it. So if you're looking for like a new 2D platformer game to check out, that one that's not going to kill you on time, check out Halloween Forever. I
I'll
definitely
check it
recommend
out.
it.
That
It's
sounds
good.
cool.
It
Sounds
just came out
cool.
on Switch yesterday. It was just released on
Ah,
Switch yesterday.
cool.
So it's definitely worth it. But no, I feel you on that because even I go through phases where I can go knock out games like that. Like I beat Ghost of Tsushima and Last of Us 2 in the span of like 2.5 weeks. Just burned through them all. But only reason I was able to do that is because I didn't have a kid yet. So it's going to be a lot harder to do things like that as she gets older. But I can understand that frustration. So you got out of you got out of gaming to focus on your career. And so what first got you into cartoons and animation? Like what was it about cartoons that drew you to them?
Well, I was really bored in school. I think I was in third grade, second or third grade, and it was a reading class, and I drew a little, like in the margins, I did a little flip book of like a worm like crawling down the page, and
Mhm.
then when I flipped it, I'm like, that's it. I have to like I want to do animation. I want to make stuff come alive, you know. So I would get like tablets and do like flip books in like little monster trucks going over like ramps and stuff,
Yeah.
and then and then I started, watch a lot of cartoons and yeah, and like I loved comics too. Like I loved comic strips. Like my really early stuff was like the worst Garfield drawings ever. Like Garfield ripoff drawings I drew of our cat Oreo and like just did comic strips and anything that I could do to like cartoony, and
Mhm.
my parents are really supportive. My mom worked in a bunch of different careers, but my dad was a package designer. But before he was a package designer, he went to school for art education,
Okay.
and he didn't push it on me or my brother at all. And I also was like really independent, so I kind of he would like just give they would just support me, like give me like lots of books about animation, like I said, and
Mhm.
like they were really supportive, and so the whole way through high school, when I decided to make that my career, or at least go to school for that, I was like towards the end of high school, I was looking into schools and I wanted to go specifically for animation. And this is like 93, 94. So this is
Okay.
right around like the the Disney boom, like the Disney feature boom. So it was like,
The Disney Renaissance, yeah.
yeah, exactly. So this is like Aladdin and Pocahontas and Beauty and the Beast and all that stuff. I didn't like
Hmm.
that stuff. I liked Aladdin because I thought it was like kind of like Looney Tunes, but not. But everything else, I did not care about. Like, not
What was it, more
I
just like
like.
the content of it, or was it because you like the more zany comical stuff?
I liked I liked the counterculture stuff. I like the smart ass stuff of Bugs Bunny. I like the raw, like the silliness. And then like I think it was during high school, like I was really into Looney Tunes. That was like my number one thing. And then Ren and Stimpy hit, and that was it. I was like, that's it. Like there's no one making cartoons. I knew the history well enough to know that there wasn't anyone making cartoons that were even close to Looney Tunes. And 90s cartoons and 80s cartoons was like the dark ages of animation because they were just based on toys. They were like almost everything was being done overseas. It was just like the worst time to try to get an animation.
And they were also cheaply made comparatively too, because like
It,
Looney Tunes, didn't they? From what I understand, Looney Tunes animation was like super high quality in terms of how many frames they put in per second, right?
yeah, but even like if you look at Looney Tunes compared to like Disney movies, they were like the cheap versions of Disney movies at the time, like in the 40s. Like those budgets were like crap, like just crappy, you know. And they were scrappy and they were fun, and like I think that's what made them cool. And so like around that time, that's when the other renaissance, like the animation renaissance, started hitting because I think the first thing was Roger Rabbit, like
Hmm.
Steven Spielberg getting in to saying, "I want to make cartoons," and Roger Rabbit hit. And at the same time, I think it was the same year. That's when Simpsons was becoming popular, or maybe a couple years before that. And then that's what led Nickelodeon into the creator-driven cartoons, and that's where like Rugrats, uh, Doug, and Ren and Stimpy came from.
Yes,
Like that's
yes.
that's where all that came from. And I was like, wow, there's actually people making real cartoons. Like when I saw Ren and Stimpy, I was like blown away because I was like, this is exactly like the Looney Tunes I like, and it's like super weird and super crazy and like kind of weird, like really psychotic and mean spirited.
Yeah.
And I didn't care so much about that. I just loved the cartooniness. Before John Kay did that, he did Mighty Mouse, and I was a big fan of Mighty Mouse too. I was like, this is like the cartooniest thing I've ever seen. And so I made that my career path. Like I was like, I want to work on, like I want to make Bugs Bunny. Like who's the only person that's close enough is even making Bugs Bunny or even knows how to do something like that? That's John Kay. That's Spumco.
Okay.
So in high school, I was like, I'm gonna go to school for animation. And being from Pennsylvania, there's like either you go to Ringling, which is in Florida, and
Hmm.
that's where they train up to go into Disney, or you go to CalArts, which is in California, which is was super expensive, which is probably still expensive, too expensive for my family, and uh, and then you would still go to Disney. So I was just like, well, what's the point? Like I want to learn. I just got to learn, right? So my parents found this school called the Joe Kubert School of Cartoon and Graphic Art, which is in New Jersey, and it was a comic school. But first, the way it was structured was a 3-year trade school. It wasn't even like an art
Okay.
school. It was a trade school, and the first year you go to, it's like kind of like basic training, like basic drawing, that kind of stuff, and then when you get to the end of your first year, you get to decide to either go into comics or animation. And
Okay.
so you have to get through the first year to get to the second year, and then the third year they try to place you. Basically, is what they're doing.
To put you in like a specific, like this is what you're doing in animation type of thing, or this is what you're doing in cartoons.
Exactly. Like the first year is like basics, second year is like really training, and the third year is like trying to get you like,
Specialized
yeah,
almost.
specialized, but also like actually like try to get you a job. Like
Okay. Okay.
they'll get your portfolio together. They'll put you in contact with people to like go to studios to like set up interviews, that kind of stuff. It was a trade school. So video game parallel through all this in high school. I tried to like cut down on my hours playing games, and then when I went to the Joe Kubert school, like that's when I started like talking to people at games and getting drawn back in because everyone was still playing more than me. And I remember going to visiting other students. Like we had like different. There was like they called it the mansion where like all the artists would live, like
Okay.
all the student artists, and it was like super cheap and super rundown. And there was like 3 or 4 people that had Super Nintendos in their room playing
Okay.
like King of Monsters 2 and the Star Wars games, and like it was that era. And then upstairs there was one guy who had Mario Kart, and it was just everyone just get together and play Mario Kart 1-on-1 or battle, and it was just screaming, and I was like, man, I miss this so much. And I
That
started like,
social element, man.
yeah,
That's the
exactly.
most.
So
That's the thing that it's always funny. Sorry to go off on this,
no,
but
go ahead.
I was just thinking, like, that's it's so weird to me that for so long the stereotype of a video game player or a video gamer was someone who sits alone in his parents' basement just playing games to like 2 a.m. when it's usually the complete opposite. You have a bunch of college guys staying up till 2 a.m., but in some rundown room screaming at each other. I used to have Halo parties like that. We would stay up to like 2 a.m. And I still remember because like in Halo 1, it would this is just a really quick anecdote, but in Halo 1, if you selected default and you didn't create a profile, it would just give you some weird name, and it was always something. The developers had some weird alt names, alt random. It was like the Bear, the Big L, Stumpy, Howard. It was just like these really random things. And I still remember my brother because we it was a LAN party, so we had a group upstairs and a group down in the basement. And someone who was Howard, I still don't know who it was, kept killing my brother, but they were on different floors. So you would, so I'm downstairs playing whoever Howard was, and I just hear from upstairs my brother starts screaming Howard, like just losing his shit because Howard just killed him so many times. Um,
I I have similar stories with N64. It wasn't different rooms, but like with you, like I moved out to California and I came back, and my friend had a N64, and I remember it was a Christmas vacation, and I wasn't working. I was working, so I had money, right? And
mhm.
he had two controllers, right? And
But
he was
no
playing like
N64.
on N64, right? And he had like Star Fox, he had GoldenEye, and he had Mario Kart, right? But it was just him and his brother would play all the time. And then I remember like, come on, guys, we're going to get another controller. We want go drive to Walmart, get a third controller, right? And then play all night. And then my other friend would join, and then we're like, okay. Then 2 nights later, go to Walmart, get another
Get a
controller. Here's
fourth
your Christmas
controller.
present, man. Like, I don't care, I want to play. And so once we had four controllers and we played those three games, and we just played those three games, we would literally. He would. I don't even think he was working at the time. We would go over there probably around 5 p.m. and play until 6 a.m. straight through, and then go to sleep and sleep till midday. Wake up and do the exact same thing, the same day after day after day. And I remember even Christmas Day being super tired Christmas Day, and then going getting presents, spending time with family, and then driving to his house and playing some more. Like we were obsessed. Like it was that Christmas vacation was the four friends that are like the
Mhm.
four of us. It's like that's the best memory. That
So good.
so much
It's
fun.
that communal aspect of gaming that's just so important. Especially, I hope at some point. I mean, it's completely impossible with COVID, but it was also kind of going that way with everything going online. But I really hope they like more game devs bring back like a couch co-op experience again. The last time I saw someone really trying to reinvent that was actually Nintendo with the Wii U. I mean, the Wii U was a flop, but it was the first console that I could think of that had up to five player couch co-op. If you played Nintendo Land, you'd have the one person on the gamepad and
Yep.
the four players on the Wiimotes, and it was fun. I actually liked Nintendo Land a whole bunch.
Me
My friends
too.
and I would
That's
play that.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite games. Even my wife and her family, they came over, and I'd be like, okay, because I'm the one gamer, like I'm
Hmm.
the cool uncle or whatever has all the games, and I'd say, okay, let's play Nintendo Land, and you get the gamepad, and then everyone else is running around as ghosts, and it was like the kids. That's some of their favorite memories. Is that playing
It's a
Nintendo
good
Land
it's
because we're all in
and
the same room, we're all playing the same game together.
exactly. And I hope stuff like that comes back. But I'm sorry, I derailed it. I mean, it's all on the same topic, but I derailed it a little bit. So you were playing while you were in art school, Super Mario Kart, and everyone was all up to the wee hours of the morning playing that together.
Yeah, and so I was still like I still I was very self disciplined and made sure that I wasn't just playing games. I saw games as like a reward for getting my work done because the way that school worked was you had 10 classes. The first year you had 10 class. Well, all the years you had 10 classes a week, and you had two classes a day, and you would go to school for 8 hours, and you probably had another at least 4 to 6 hours of work to do outside of school just to
Okay.
get the assignments done for every class. So I think what they did with that school was they really prepared everybody to manage your time. Like literally, like this is what it's going to be a professional artist. If you can't hang with this, you're out. And they had a 50% dropout rate the first year, and it made sense. Like I thank them for preparing me for what it would be later. Because that's what it's like. There's like tons of work. It's in a crazy amount, like deadlines and everything. It's just crazy. And so I still was very disciplined. Over the summer I would play. Like I
Hmm.
remember going to art school and then coming home for that summer, and that was when Super Bomberman hit, and my brother had 4 controllers for the Super Nintendo, and we just played Super Bomberman all summer. We would get together with 4 people and just play Super Bomberman nonstop.
So you actually had like the multi-tap for the N60 or for the Super Nintendo to play that then, right?
Yep, yep. And still, that's some of my favorite gaming memories too. Is that and Mario Kart? Like that summer was just all. I think Super Bomberman 2 came out around that time too. Uh, and yeah, it was like definitely Super Bomberman 1, because that's where you could get like you could play that one level where it was everyone, the speed was up the whole way and you had detonators, and it was so much fun. It was so much fun.
Whenever you make something more chaotic with multiplayer, when it's chaotic for everybody, it's some of the best memories you're going to have in general.
Yeah.
In my Halo LAN parties, one more story about that, we would play on this level called the longest, and it was the smallest level in Halo 1 multiplayer, and you could set it so it was all explosives and infinite grenades. So and so everyone had rocket launchers. That was the only weapon. And it was just, you're just hurl, like you just don't stop throwing grenades. It was infinite grenades. What else are you going to do? You just keep throwing. And it was recommended that you'd play with only like 4 to 6 players. We would cram 14 in there, and the game couldn't handle it because there was too many explosions happening over the network at the same time. It's still some of my favorite memories. I actually, for my, just to put in perspective how much I loved Halo parties, for my bachelor party, I didn't go to a strip club. I didn't go to I didn't go to a party and get drunk for like I didn't go on like a 3 day bender. I went out to dinner with my friends and my friends and brothers. We went to a hockey game, and then we went back and had a Halo party for like 4 or 5 hours till like 3 in the morning. It was fantastic.
But for my 40th birthday, I had an NES party. Like
Yo.
I flew my brother out to my house, and we played. He got in on Friday morning, I think, and then we played all night until about 2 or 3, and we all had a game that we were going to beat. Right, so I
Okay.
beat, we beat the 3 Mega Mans. I beat Mega Man 3, and then my friend, my brother beat Bonnet Commando, and then my other friend was going to beat Ninja Gaiden, because he used to be able to do it in high school. Like he used to come home. He
Oh.
said this is his like story is he'd come home from school and I just played through that and beat it. Just didn't after, and I was like, holy crap! Like no way, no way. And he got super close. He got to the part where he had to do like the 3 slashes in midair to get past that one enemy, and it was just I can't believe like he blew through it. He blew through it up to that point, and he was out of practice. But if he was in practice, I could tell he could beat that game.
That's so he wasn't bullshitting. He was
Yeah,
telling the truth.
yeah.
I'm a
So
little disappointed to hear that you did not make your brother bring his own NES like it was back when you were kids.
yeah, exactly. That would have been funny. But like that next we stayed up till 2 o'clock, and then I woke everybody up at like 6 o'clock. Played Saturday morning cartoons, and
Ooh,
then we went
okay.
to get In-N-Out burgers, and then we went what's it called? We did go karting, and then we went
Okay.
to medieval times, and then we slept like babies the next night. That was like that was a tons of fun. That was great. That was like one of the best birthdays I ever had.
My friends and I, pre-COVID, we would actually have retro game nights where we would all bring a bunch of. I mean, this is just like last year or so because I got a lot of my friends back into got them into collecting and got them into retro games, and so we would have these retro game nights where we'd all bring a bunch of stuff together and we would see how far we could get through a game. Like I beat Contra for the first time at one of these retro. It was with the Konami code, mind you, and with a second player, but I beat it.
That's
I'm counting.
awesome.
I'm counting it. Credits rolled, so I'm counting it. Um, also beat Super Mario Brothers 3 for the first time. Because, like I said, I didn't grow up with the NES and Super Nintendo. A lot of this stuff I've experienced retroactively, and it's weird. Actually, this might be a good topic before, because I do want to still talk about life in the analog age, and I want to talk about your work as an animator. But I've asked this question to other people before, and I haven't done it in a while, so I think it's a good one. Do you have any misplaced nostalgia? It doesn't have to be video game specific, but misplaced nostalgia in the idea of that you are nostalgic for something you did not personally experience. For example, I did not grow up with the NES, like I said. And here's a good one. I didn't grow up with like Transformers or He Man or G.I. Joe. But whenever I watch those cartoons, I get nostalgic for like that feeling. Or like even with the NES, and Super Mario Bros. 3 and the Wizard. I did not experience the hype around the Wizard and Super Mario Bros. 3 and that, and how it revealed Super Mario Bros. 3 in the movie, and people got to see it for the first time like that. But when I watch that movie, I still get the feeling like I did. And so it's very strange because that's misplaced nostalgia.
For me, it's definitely like when I listen to 80s music, early 80s, specifically early 80s music that's like definitely new wave, like the like all the British synth pop stuff, like
Hmm.
all that stuff. Like I imagine that it must have been so cool to be like in nightclubs and stuff at that time to hear that music. Every time I hear that, I feel like I experienced that kind of nostalgia, like being in England or something, or at least being a teenager in the 80s would have been amazing. Like I'm too old for that, and I think that would have been awesome. I mean, I guess I was a teenager towards the end. Well, not even a teenager, but I was old enough to like listen to 80s music on the radio, but like
Hmm.
I feel that I was always a little too late for everything. I didn't listen to 80s. I listened to more 80s music in the 90s than I listened to 90s music. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
in
I
the
get you.
2000s, I played more 90s games than I did games from the 2000s. Like it's a weird thing. Even the NES, like I stopped at a certain point to concentrate on my career, and now a couple years ago, I went back and decided to like I have a bucket list of games and I want to beat these games. I always would get games and I'd be like I just keep amassing all these games, right? I'm like this is for retirement. This I'll eventually get to this. I'll like when I don't have any as much work, I will play these games, right? And then it was 4 or 5 years ago I was like, you know what, screw it. All side projects, I'm just going to put everything on pause. My career's going really well. I'm just going to play like there's a list of games I want to beat. And one of them was Castlevania 3, and that game was so hard, and I beat it. It took me like whatever it was, like 30 years or whatever, or 27 years or however long it took.
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
the one game that I owned. I could not beat, and I have a feel. I have a memory of getting to Dracula and not beating him. I don't know if that's true or not. I think I might have gotten close, but I don't know if I actually got to Dracula, and I could not beat that game. And then like when I beat that game, that was like one of the most satisfying. Like that and Adventure Island were like the
Okay.
two hardest games that you know to sit down and beat. Like I haven't done that for a while actually. Like that was like 3 4 years ago. This past winter, I did sit down during Christmas break and beat Strider for the NES. Like that game is not easy either because it's janky. It's just not made well,
Hmm.
and it's not designed very well. So that's what makes that game hard. You know.
Adventure Island, that game is, did you know that was a port of Wonder Boy?
Yeah, yeah.
That
It has like a really weird history, like
Yes.
super weird. And
Yes, it
but
does.
that's see, okay, that's one thing I really like about games that is also like cartoon because cartoons keep getting like reinvented or like being caricatured, and then they turn into like their own thing that was based on something else, right? And it's kind of becomes its own thing that's not related to the original thing, like Super Mario Brothers, right?
Hmm.
Like the reason Mario eats mushrooms is because of Alice in Wonderland. Direct reference to that. Did eat a mushroom makes you grow bigger or smaller. That's where Miyamoto got that from. He was super influenced by like Fleischer cartoons. The reason Mario looks like the way he does and is because an animator came in and redesigned it. You know what I mean? Like animation is like the the focal point for Mario. But Mario's turned since then has turned into like this weird. He's like a Mickey Mouse character, but he's like a working man, but he's Italian. It's like this weird abstraction of like what the original thing was.
Yeah, yeah.
And same with cartoons. You take like like how many weird Batmans are there? The original Batman compared to what he is now is like not even close to what it originally was,
I
you
mean,
know?
even if you take out the animation aspect, you have like Batman 66 compared to Michael Keaton's Batman, and then you add in Batman the animated series, and then you have Christian Bale's Batman, and then you even have, I haven't watched it, but I know it's a little bit more lighthearted than a lot of the stuff that came out at the time. But Batman and the Brave and the Bold, or whatever it is,
Yeah.
I haven't watched it, but I've heard that's a lot more of a like kind of like a fun, lighthearted take on the character versus everything up and for the last 15 20 years up to that point was very so serious and gruff and
Yeah.
dark and edgy.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's weird. It's like I don't, it's just such a weird thing. Like it's so weird. Like you were talking about we were talking about Felix the Cat, right?
Mhm.
So Felix the Cat in the 20s was a comic strip, right? Then in the 60s it was reinvented as like a animated series, right? And then in the 90s, since Ren and Stimpy was so big, like half the Ren and Stimpy people went and they did a Felix the Cat cartoon. And then the video game is based on the Felix the Cat cartoon
Of the
and it has
90s.
nothing to do with the original 20s character. Like hardly anything. Like he didn't have a magic bag, none of that stuff. It was just like this weird surreal comic strip, you know? It's so cool. Like I love tracing all that stuff back.
there
That's one of
was
my favorite things to do.
there was a panel I went to at an anime convention I went to years ago, and it was called the cultural exchange between the United States and Japan, and it was talking about it was literally just that, tracing back the etymology, for lack of a better term, of all these different thing. So they were talking about how when you look at, just a quick example, you look at Star Wars. Star Wars direct influence was Akira Kurosawa's The Hidden Fortress, which was a direct influence of John Ford Western movies, which I'm sure if you trace that back to something else, you probably could find it. So that was a very direct lineage of John Ford Western movies essentially created Star Wars, but you would never think about that because they look so totally different. But Star Wars is a Western in space. And then you even look at other things like The Lion King is Kimba the White Lion. But the whole reason they didn't give that any credit was because I believe there was like a licensing issue at the time when Disney was making the movie, and no one knew who really owned Kimba the White Lion in the States, or who had the distribution rights in the States. So Disney's just like, well, we're just going to scrub all mention of it and not get sued.
It's like Monty Python, right? You could take
Hmm.
Monty Python. The reason the animation was in Monty Python is because of Terry Gilliam. Terry Gilliam was directly influenced by Mad Magazine. That's why he became an animator,
Okay.
right? Mad Magazine was directly influenced by Looney Tunes. So you could do a straight line from Looney Tunes to Monty Python. And then Monty Python, also Saturday Night Live. Saturday Night Live was a huge counterculture thing in the 70s directly related to Looney Tunes. Like it's weird. Like a lot of things go back to like actually Looney Tunes, and then Looney Tunes goes back to
Pop
um,
culture of the 30s and 40s, even
yeah,
like.
but it's also like radio programs and
Hmm.
like it's radio personalities they would caricature into the cartoons and they were and it was counterculture. It was like popular culture, but it was like
Making fun of the
subversive. Yeah,
popular
exactly. It was
culture.
subversive, and it was like it's really interesting that like there's not as much of that going on now, but there is definitely like direct lineage going on. You know?
It's cool to me too, because Looney Tunes specifically, and to what you guys have done with Animaniacs to an extent now, is that a lot of that was pop culture school for people that didn't experience the pop culture you're referencing. So I didn't know who Humphrey Bogart was in when I'm watching Looney Tunes. I didn't know who Frank Sinatra was or Bing Crosby was. Like I still even think of like that one Foghorn Leghorn sketch, or maybe it wasn't Foghorn Leghorn, but it was like there was like these two chickens, and one was based off of Bing Crosby, and the other was based off of Frank Sinatra, and they were trying to swoon, the trying to make all these other hens swoon for who could make the hens
Yep.
swoon harder, and it was. I didn't know what that was when I was a kid. I just saw these ridiculous cartoons of chickens singing, and it was funny to me.
Yeah.
But like as you get older and then you start learning a little bit, you start digging more into it. And plus, uh, perfect example with Looney Tunes, classical music. Like you don't hear that on the radio unless you're going out to seek it. So that's the first time you hear, Ride of the Valkyries or the William Tell Overture or something like that.
Yeah, I mean that's the reason that I even like classical music is because of Looney Tunes. Like that's the only
Hmm.
reason I even know. I mean, everyone's kind of exposed to the same things, and then, well, I mean, not anymore. Everyone's kind of exposed to everything, but like there are like these huge cultural like tent poles of
Touchstones,
kind of
yeah.
everyone, someone experiences something, and they kind of all shoot off from that. Like I know people that, same people I watched cartoons with when I was a kid who still watch cartoons today, and they're not animators. You know what I mean? They didn't study it or anything. They just love it. And they also like got into things because of cartoons, but totally different things. So
Hmm. And it's harder to find those touchstones, those tentpole things now, just because everything is so niche. Like there's so many. I mean, just look. I mean, you look at television now, and this is not a criticism; it's just more of an observation. Like the numbers that television pulls in is drastically lower than what it was 20, 30 years ago, because now everyone's interests have been diversified so much, which is a great thing because it means that there's so much content and so many people are able to make a living off of their creativity now that they didn't used to. But at the same time, it's a lot harder to get noticed, and it's a lot harder to you don't see the same numbers that you used to because everything's so
exactly.
spaced out now.
Yeah, I mean, the
Yeah.
industry, even the animation industry, has changed a lot because of that. And, you know, I mean, it's weird, like right now, like in development and the way people are thinking about streaming and stuff, it's like you can't just pitch like a weird oddball thing. There's too many of those things. There's too many of that kind of show. They're kind of looking for these like, let's take like attach something that's really popular or base, like it has to be like either like an interesting way of making it, or it has to be like someone that it's like attached to it, right? And the reason is because they're chasing after like the Animaniacs thing. They're literally chasing after these like, I didn't realize that Animaniacs was such a big cultural phenomenon because I was in high school and then went to art school, and I was in the Ren and Stimpy camp. Like I directly Ren and Stimpy,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I wasn't like the biggest fan. I liked it. I appreciated it because I'm an animator and everything. I really liked Pinky and the Brain, but I was more like, it wasn't like I hated it or anything. It was just like I cared more about Ren and Stimpy
Well, and
because that was
also
like
you were a little bit
authentic
older
Looney
at the time
Tunes.
too.
Exactly.
So it was just
And
a little bit out of your age range at the time.
yeah, and now I realize like that is a big cultural. It was like a cultural phenomenon. That's why they're doing reboots. I mean, that's literally why they're doing them. They're chasing after that. Like all these people will pile on one thing, and they'll get like all these huge numbers. And to be a part of the Animaniacs and like that whole cultural thing that is the Animaniacs, like I
Hmm.
feel really privileged, and I hope I did it, honorably. Made it, did it correctly. I mean, that's what everyone wishes, that just to be embraced by the fans, and um, and to really pay honor to the original thing. But it's like interesting that it's hard to get this. Like that's the reason why everyone's chasing after that right now. It's exactly what you said. Like everyone's like really, it's so niche. It's so fragmented, basically.
And it's hard to
So
find what's going to. It's impossible to predict what's really going to be, especially with meme culture. It's really impossible to predict what is the thing that's going to stick. Perfect example to bring it to kind of tie video games into this a little bit. The Lady Dimitrescu from the Resident Evil trailer or game that came out recently. She was this. She's what, 9 feet tall, and she's got a big chest, and she took the internet by storm. And Capcom's like, what the hell's going on? Like, why is the internet obsessed with this one random character? It's like you can't predict that type of stuff. Like meme culture is really diversified a
yeah,
lot, so many
Baby
different ways.
Yoda is the other one. Like Disney freaked out. They were unprepared. They had no idea what was going on, and I mean, to me, I see Baby Yoda, and I'm like, that's exactly a Mogwai.
How did you
It's
not see that coming?
But I mean, like even the design is a Mogwai. Like you put Gizmo
Okay,
next to
yeah,
Baby
yeah, yeah,
Yoda,
yeah. I could see
and
that.
like they're the exact same shape, the same silhouette, the eyes are in the same place, the ears are the same size, and I was like, yeah, like that's why. Like, of course, it's Baby Yoda. It's super cute. It's beautiful, but it's the same design as a Mogwai. Like, it's literally the same. It's the same
I
design
never
as
put two and two
Gizmo.
together.
It
You're
even
right.
moves the same way. So I think that's cool. I think stuff like that's really cool. I don't think it was a conscious decision. It just kind of
Happy
probably ended
accident.
up that way. But like, it's funny that stuff like that happens, and yeah, there's no way to predict it. There's just no way. And I bet you Gremlins is going to come out, and it's not even going to be as popular as Baby Yoda, even though
Probably.
it's the same design. So
And there's just so many different things that are getting, like you said, they have to find some, either a license or just some big name to attach to it. Like one I'm looking forward to now is Netflix is doing a Redwall animated series. And I loved the Redwall books when I was younger. And there was an animated Redwall series that was done in Canada in like the early 2000s, but it's very cheesy and it's good. It's fun, but it's definitely, it doesn't, I think it's meant that it doesn't age well for adults. It overall everything looks good. It aged well in terms of quality, but it didn't age well in terms of like you don't get as much out of it. So I'm looking forward to what they do with that. But once again, that's a license that has it's a known property that's going to get them those big numbers that they need, because you can't, it's a lot harder to hit with something that's not known. And that's why there's
exactly.
like what some of the bigger ones that like you look at even recently, Adventure Time and the regular show and stuff like that. Rick and Morty, even though this might be controversial to say to some of my fans, I'm not a fan of the show, but it's just the humor just doesn't get like, I don't find it that funny. But
Yeah.
that's neither here nor
I
there.
have a bunch of friends that are the same way. But
I'm
don't
gonna
don't feel bad. Like you're in the minority, but like don't feel bad.
sorry
It's also very mean spirited too. I don't know.
I
That
think
might also
that's
be turning it off. Might be the
yeah.
turn off for you. It's very mean spirited,
I
that
think
show.
that's what it is. It's one of the reasons I also couldn't get into Seinfeld or The League, because everyone's just not a good person. I understand why people find it funny. Like it's not it's weird for me to like say this is a good show. I just really don't like it.
Yeah,
Uh
I think that mean spirited stuff has its place, and I think that there's definitely shows that are more mean spirited, but it's harder to make the means. It's kind of like the low hanging fruit sometimes. Like I'm saying that from a person who's working on Animaniacs, but like I don't think that we're mean. Like, I think we just like poke fun at stuff and like uh,
well, I see a little bit of the Chuck Jones influence in your Animaniacs, where at least in some of the episodes, the Warner twin, the Warner siblings, the triplets, they
yeah.
don't instigate fights generally. They have to. There is an instigator, and they are reacting. They are only mean when they are forced into it. Versus, they're still insane, and they might like play like make fun of you a little bit here and there, but they're never going to like be mean to you until you instigate it with them.
Well,
You
they're
know what I
they're
mean?
like anarchists, right? So they're
Yes.
like the Marx Brothers. So the Marx Brothers, they were funny and they were silly, but they didn't work until they had Night of the Opera was like the breakout hit for the Marx Brothers. And like once you had like a big pompous jerk who's just someone that needs to be taken down a peg, right?
Hmm.
That's the Marx Brothers. That's exactly what the Warner Brothers cartoons are all about. Well, that version of the Warner. There's other cartoons, but like
Yeah, yeah.
that's like that's them as characters are like little anarchists, and that's what's fun about the show. Like I don't know, I always like that like smart assy type of humor and or like insightful for the right reasons, and being a smart ass. I don't know, like that's I always like that, and that's what drew me to that, like making that show.
For me, it's like you need a grounding element for me. Like you need something to for me to be able to understand why a character is doing something other than just like they're a bad person. Like that could, like, you can give that reason for any mean spirited humor. Like, oh, they're just a bad person, so of course they're going to do this. But like, you either need to have show, like, a good example of this is like Schitt's Creek. That show took me a while to get into because a lot of those characters aren't necessarily good people, but as you watch through the show, they are learning. They are not staying the same mean bad person they were at the beginning of the show. Life has changed them. Like, these circumstances have changed them. And if you look at other shows where maybe it's a little bit more zany, you need someone who is the grounding element to kind of bring everyone back to reality. Like, my favorite show of all time is Scrubs. I adore that show so much. And Carla, in a very big sense, is the grounding character in that show, because she is the least zany out of all of them, the least insane. But at the
Yeah.
same time, she still has her own funny moments. It's not like she doesn't get to be funny. It's just in different she brings them back to reality. When you have every character in a show or in a movie or whatever it is that is either all zany or they're all mean or they're all one thing, then it makes it a lot harder for me to get into it. Even if they're all just nice people, that's also boring because then you don't have any juxtaposition, you know?
Yeah.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Oh, let's put a pin in the conversation right here. That's right. This conversation was so long and so fantastic. I have enough here to split it up into 2 full episodes, which that means instead of coming out in 2 weeks' time, the second part of this conversation is going to actually come out next week. That's right. It is going to be 3 weeks in a row for the first time in a little bit. So, yes, you will get to hear the continuation and the conclusion of my conversation with Gabe next week on the podcast. Real quick, as for me, you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at StillLoadingPod on all of them. You can also email me, stillloadingcontact@gmail.com. You can also go to Patreon, patreon.com/stillloadingpod, and give it a 5-star rating review on Apple Podcasts or whichever podcasting app you use. As for Gabe, you can follow him on Twitter, Gabe_Swarr. That is Gabe_SWARR. And also make sure when you do go to his Twitter, he has a Patreon, so please go consider supporting him on his Patreon. He is currently working on another game. We get into his first game, Life in the Analog Age, Rainy Day, in the next segment, and he talks a lot about the development of his Game Boy game. So yeah, if you like what you hear, please go check out his stuff. He's so nice, and I love this conversation with him, and I can't wait for you to hear the rest of it next week. So with all that said, I will see you all next time.